Okay, and welcome everyone. My name is Tushar Patel. I work at the University of Lethbridge, whose indigenous name is Iniskam, as Associate Dean and Canada Research Chair. I'm also a professor in biochemistry, and with CSPC, I work as a volunteer and member of the program committee. Today, I have a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Francois Baylis, the president of the Royal Society of Canada. Dr. Baylis is globally recognized philosopher known for their work in applied ethics at the intersection of theory and practice. Dr. Baylis has received a number of awards, most importantly, the Order of Nova Scotia, Order of Canada, Fellow of the Royal Society of Canada, and former research chair, Canada Research Chair, Tier 1. So, Dr. Baylis, thank you for joining us. Today, I look forward to have a brief conversation with you, and I'll ask a couple of questions, and we'll have a formal conversations on your role as the Royal Society of Canada president, but also a few other aspects. So with that, my first question is, as the president of the Royal Society of Canada, what is your vision for the Royal Society in terms of its role in shaping the future of arts, humanities, science, academia? Any thoughts on those topics would be greatly appreciated.
One of the two pillars of the Royal Society of Canada is excellence and engagement. And I think one of the things that's really important to appreciate is the excellent part of that is recognizing the talent that we have in Canada. And the Royal Society is deeply committed to the notion of inclusive excellence. And that's meaning understanding very broadly the talents of Canadians and the contributions that they make in terms of both scholarship and artistic endeavors, etc. And then the other piece, the engagement, that's really something that we need to think about in a variety of different ways, or if you will, at different levels. And so I think that we have to increase our commitments in that regard. So I think of engagement as what we need to do vis-a-vis the Canadian public. Lots of talk these days about the fact that there's a lack of trust in science. Well, trust isn't gifted, right? Trust is earned. And I think Canadians who work in the area of science need to do more to earn that trust. And so we're going to be part of that effort and initiative writ large to try to earn the trust of Canadians. I think there's also a piece of engagement that we need to do internally amongst our fellows and college members so that people who are part of the RSC family know each other, work together, improve the work they do through interdisciplinary activities. And then the third piece is I think we really need to have some engagement with the policy arena. One of the things that I expressed to the membership when I put my name forward as a candidate is I said, we're not in the room where it happens. And what I meant by that is that we have so much talent across this country, some of it in our universities, some of it in our companies, some of it in government. But how do we work together and make sure that it's available to our policymakers so that they can have evidence-informed policies?
So thank you. So just to summarize your answer, you propose to work within the community with the Royal Society, because excellent pool of researchers across the discipline, work with the community to gain their trust, and also work with other partners to make sure that these types of activities go ahead. So this is a great insight. It also covers one of my questions around, I'm going to jump ahead, around the misinformation and polarized public disclosure. And you touched upon some of those topics. So could you share a little bit more insight in Royal Society's role to help Canada rebuild and sustain trust in science and academia?
Well, I think one of the things we need to do is become a trusted interlocutor. And what I mean by that is we want to be a go-to place. And there's a lot of places in this sort of ecosystem that sort of qualify to be that. And I want to make sure that the people that have been recognized as having excelled in their field of research are amongst those that get to be at the table. And one of the things that I think is really important is that table might sometimes be thought of as a picnic. And it's in the context of thinking about how can you have Canadians support you in your research, support you in your advocacy vis-a-vis policymakers for additional resources to do your job well, to build a better Canada. Well, to accomplish that, you need to bring them along with you. You need to explain the science you're doing. You need to ask them, how can they understand that science as being useful to them, making their lives better, and creating opportunities for them to weigh in and to shape the direction of science. We often talk about blue sky science, or sometimes we talk about mission-driven science, or basic science, or applied science. We talk about these in different ways. And I think the real important thing is just to understand that for the public, what matters is that we deliver on the science that we have, and that we have a really rich ecosystem in which everybody who has something to contribute can find their place and make that contribution.
Thank you. And would you think that outreach activities could help us also address some of the misinformation?
Absolutely. And part of our action plan, which has just been approved, includes us moving forward with, I'm going to say 160 plus, because I don't remember the exact number, but it's more than 160 and maybe less than 170. I don't remember. But the point is a considerable number of town halls. So we've committed to doing that. And that's in the context of trying to say, we will have the support of Canadians if we take the time to respectfully engage with them and explain to them, this is the challenge, this is the opportunity, and this is what we're bringing to the table. And we want Canadians to get excited about that, One of the things, in a conversation I had today that I thought was amazing is many Canadians will remember those little heritage minutes, right? 60 seconds and you learn about Banting and Best. And so, if you're a proud Canadian, it might be the first time you've heard about that, but maybe then you'd say, hey, did you know we had this role in science internationally? That's the one that's there. Some of the others are about other topics, historical moments. And I was thinking, why don't we do that for science? Like, what about the 60-second science minutes, Maybe we start with some of our Nobel laureates and we just explain to them, they have had this international honor. Why? Because they've done this in science to make the world a better place for Canada and for everybody else. We need to find ways to toot our own horn in Canada. We have great science here, and the average Canadian benefits from that without understanding how they've contributed, at least through their tax dollars in many cases.
So more messaging with multiple fronts to the community.
Absolutely, but I think we really have to bring the community along. And I think the community is involved sometimes with fundraising for particular areas of science. That tends to be more obvious in the health sciences. But there's other areas of science in which we make dramatic contributions, and those contributions aren't going to come from that kind of source. So we're now looking at government, business, philanthropy, and we need to have Canadians sort of knocking on their doors saying, hey, support these people, they're doing great work.
Amazing, thank you so much. Your work has intersected bioethics, genomics, genetics, gene editing, and a lot of different technology. So on that note, my question is, what ethical challenges do you believe that will most define the next decade of innovation? Because as we go with innovation, there will be ethical challenges coming along the way.
Yeah, so I think we need to modernize our governance frameworks. And the reason I think that is that we've often thought in the realm of science about laws, guidelines, legislation, internationally maybe treaties, declarations, et cetera. And the idea there is we're going to standardize things, or we're going to look after, making sure we have a favorable harm-benefit ratio in the area of certain kinds of science. And then what happens in that space is some people see that as constraining science or limiting the possibilities because we've put up these sort of roadblocks. I think we're in a different sphere now, given the kind of science that we're doing and the potential for that science to be transformative. And we need to understand that that kind of governance actually is more to be thought of as guardrails. And it's giving you actually flexibility within those guardrails so that you know that, hey, I'm in a space where I can play and it's okay. But having said that, that's still not a modern governance system because you're still staying within sort of hard frameworks. What we need to start looking at are things like, we need to think about publication as a part of governance, right? Because publishers can say, this is good research from a science point of view, but they could also weigh in and say, from an ethical point of view, that's actually a little bit problematic.
Yeah,
so think about if you're wanting to publish science that's controversial, not because of its scientific content, but perhaps you're stepping over what others might describe as a red line. An example of that would be recent efforts to do what's called heritable genome editing, where you're actually looking to make changes to the DNA of humans that will be passed on from generation to generation to generation. The more recent thing now is conversations around mirror life. And if I bring it back to something a little bit simpler that the average Canadian might understand, we have concerns about artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
So it starts with artificial intelligence, it then becomes generative artificial intelligence, it then becomes agentic artificial intelligence. So if you're thinking about governance, it can't just be a collection of rules and regulations. We need to be thinking about all the soft ways in which we can help to direct the technology in directions that will benefit everyone. I mentioned publication, there's also patents, there's also ways of thinking about resources that are brought to bear in terms of basic education for people working in institutions that have responsibility for oversight. So I think there's a lot of things there that we need to think about creatively. And I think if we don't do that, here's the biggest worry. You will have misguided billionaires spending their money on idiosyncratic priorities that maybe won't benefit the communities writ large.
Yeah, sounds like we have something that we know already on that.
Well, I wasn't going to name any names, but anyhow.
But I get your point. So I think I'll jump on to one of the last questions, apart from CSPC. So you have been a strong advocate for equity, diversity, and inclusion in your career throughout, even before it became a more of a cooler term than practice. And what do you believe are the most urgent steps to ensure that the next generation of scholars, particularly women and underrepresented communities, can thrive in our communities?
I think you have to start with a core belief that talent is everywhere, and that you don't bring to any kind of formal or informal assessment the biases that come from wherever you're from. And that could be, where you're from could be you as an embodied person, but it could also be you as an intellectual person who sees or believes that there's only certain kinds of perspectives that are right, there's only certain kinds of people that are likely to have those perspectives and be able to advance them, etc. I think we are all better off for having the ability to embrace a diversity of ideas. And I think that what we need to understand is the fact that something's different doesn't mean it's necessarily worse than what we think because it's familiar, right? So I think one of the things that's really important for me is to just underline there's talent and excellence everywhere, and that we've not always looked for it in the places where it is. And I want to say it very much with that emphasis on there's talent everywhere, because I think too much of the recent conversation has been to suggest that some of these initiatives, which are trying to be attentive to inclusive excellence, are somehow lifting up people of a certain cadre who aren't meeting the standards. That's an absolutely wrong perspective. It's the fact that you've come to an assessment with a cluster of biases that you don't even see or understand. And so that's the challenge culturally, is to get people to understand that there's all kinds of ways of knowing, there's all kinds of ways of contributing, and there's different things that we need to actually understand when we go into that kind of an assessment as to what's going to constitute the pool of excellence.
I think our matrix somehow needs to be also reimagined for many different selections and selection criteria.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, the Royal Society of Canada is deeply committed to that. I mean, we've got it in print. We are committed to inclusive excellence, and, we are prepared to stand up for that and to explain it and to defend it, because it's not in any way, shape, or form undermining excellence. It cannot be understood as undermining excellence. It's, in fact, increasing the scope of what counts as excellent.
Thank you. That's a great answer. I appreciate your efforts also from the Royal Society front as well. So the last question is, you've been CSPC member for a while, been coming to all of these meetings, you know the community. So in your view, what is the role that CSPC can play as a connection hub, knowledge mobilizer for science and innovation policy landscape?
I think one of the really important roles it has played and can continue to play is really in that space of being a convener, of getting different people in the room and encouraging them to talk with each other, understanding that they come at similar problems from different perspectives, but not only different perspectives, different roles and responsibilities. And I think one of the key things is if everybody can be encouraged to understand where are the differences in terms of your expertise and your ability to influence, but that you can still be open-minded and borrow ideas and do things in a collegial and collaborative way. And I think really we need spaces like that. So, you know, we can have all the policymakers here, we can have all the business people there, we can have all the academics here, but what's valuable is bringing them all together. And I think the other thing that's really noticeable is really paying attention to generational contributions, that you have people with lots of expertise and talent, but you have lots of people with lots of knowledge and energy. And if you can put all those people together, what wonderful things could we accomplish, right? And so for me, that's one of the key things. I mean, I know it does a lot of other things, but the thing that I find really attractive is this unique kind of role to be the convener and to work really I don't want to say neutral because nobody's neutral, but not to bring biases to the table, not to make assumptions about who's knowledgeable, who's important, who's whatever. It's like, we're in this together. Let's try and name our common problems and let's see who can put what in front of each other in terms of solutions and openness to how we might modify those to move all of us forward.
Well, so thank you so much, Dr. Baylis. We had a lot of fun talking about your views and vision for the Royal Society, especially in the domain of inclusivity and misinformation and many other aspects. So we really appreciate with you being here and your time.
Well, thank you very much. And I have to say it was wonderful to be invited to represent the Royal Society here. And I'm looking forward to many ongoing conversations.
Amazing. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.